Hello, Gary. How are you?
Hi, Gary.
Fine, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fantastic. So,
Yeah.
Gary, you are the founder of FounderTribes, right? But you have a whole long history of supporting entrepreneurs and obviously speaking about equality, diversity, and inclusion as well. So, really privileged to have you today. Where are you joining us from?
Yeah, I'm in New York right now, so came here to vote in the elections in person.
Commitment. I love it.
Yeah.
And what a great result as well, right?
Yeah, it looks as if the desired and expected result is finally going to be respected. So yeah, we're hopeful of that. Yeah, it looks as if can't really complain about that. I think 2021 is looking to be a lot better than 2020. Change of leadership, vaccines, good stock market, so it's looking all good.
Exactly.
How are things in New York, Gary?
Sorry?
Is in New York, is it fairly quiet or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's really different in the US, I guess, relative to the UK is even though like we're on lockdown in the UK, I think here there's more of a sense of like danger about COVID. I mean, I think people take it like super hyper seriously in the sense of like, everything now is about Thanksgiving, which is tomorrow, and how you're not supposed to go see your family. The governor of New York got into trouble because he said that he was going to meet up with his mother and his daughters for Thanksgiving, and people were like, no, you're not supposed to meet up with anyone. You're supposed to kind of just stay at home, and if people don't live in your household, don't meet up with them. So it's kind of like a huge issue here, and I think in a way that maybe it's not quite in the UK.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I got a friend who lives in New York, and he said it's so changed in the last 8 months. It's quite a scary place to be in many respects.
I went to the city, and I mean, it was because my parents live outside of the city, and it was really unique because I mean, I was like basically right next to Central Park, and there were no cars. I mean, and that never happens in New York. No taxis.
No.
Yellow
Oh
taxis.
my God. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So it was just complete empty street, and it wasn't just like the street that I was on. It was like you could like look all the way down. I took a picture of it, and there were no cars. So it is kind of like not quite a ghost town, but people again are definitely staying inside, socially distancing, and all that kind of stuff, and taking it very, very seriously because the second wave is real here, and the first wave was devastating. I mean, New York was the epicenter of COVID for most of the spring. So yeah, people take it seriously.
Gary, before we obviously get into your interview with regards to EGI, tell us about Founders Tribe. I'm really eager to make sure everybody knows what that is as well as part of this interview.
No, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So I mean, FounderTribes, the idea really is to level the playing field. I mean, I think it in a couple of different ways. If you look at, who gets funded and who doesn't get funded, I think in the UK, the number is something like there have only been 38 Black founders that have received an investment of more than $1 million in the last 10 years. That's like less than 0.25% of all funding goes to Black founders. Female founders, it's only something usually like 2 to 3%. In the US, the numbers are similar. It's like 1% for Black founders, 2 to 3% for women founders. So the idea is that there are just lots of people who are being left behind, and not just like lots of people, but then lots of like sectors, right? So if you don't have like a sexy potential unicorn, then everyone kind of wants to ignore you. It's almost as if like you're discardable. And so what we're really focusing on is, how do you make sure that you offer the best entrepreneurial education and kind of access to resources, networks, and eventually capital, not just to the potential unicorns, but to everybody else, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or what sector they have chosen to focus on as a founder. And so we just do that through an app. And then the app essentially kind of helps founders to kind of orient themselves as to what are the questions that they need to ask in general about their businesses, and then how can we provide them with the access to people and other resources that will help them to answer those questions. And once we feel like they've sufficiently answered those questions, then we can start making the introductions that can really take their businesses to the next level.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Useful product and service, absolutely. So according to research, women, LGBTQ+, and POC, people of colour, small business owners, are part of the largest growing segment of entrepreneurs, yet the most underserved. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, to call it out, I think that there are unconscious biases. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you look at the way that a lot of, the kind of financing and fundraising industry has worked, it's basically, at least in the case of venture capital, been based on kind of old boys networks that have kind of, people who kind of create a company before potentially, and then made a bit of money from it, then choosing to invest some of that money in people that look like them. And so these are very, very kind of like closed networks that kind of support each other. And anyone that doesn't kind of fit into what they call like their pattern or the pattern recognition tends to be excluded. So, if you don't look like Mark Zuckerberg or kind of other representations of entrepreneurial success, then people deem you to be kind of too much of a risk to kind of really put their money into. And I think that maybe it's not always done consciously, but the effect is the same, which is that, as the numbers I said before show, lots of people are just excluded across sectors and across races, genders, sexual orientations, etc.
So Gary, talk us through some of the different challenges that diverse entrepreneurs might face when they're trying to scale their business, which other founders might not.
Yeah, no, so I was just on this like commission. I think it was like the working group for the number 10 commission on race and ethnic disparities. And they were looking at the work of another commission I was on, which was the British Business Bank, which actually analyzed a lot of this data. So that was like the first time there was like, just like really good, not the first time maybe, but like one of the best studies I've seen recently on kind of this particular issue. I think the first thing is that a lot of people don't have access to the initial capital to set up a business. Like, this whole notion that you should get your first check or first bunch of checks from friends, fools, and family. A lot of people of color or people who don't come from the quote unquote right socioeconomic background, they don't have friends and family that can give them a check for $50,000 or $100,000. It doesn't mean that the idea sucks. It just means that like you don't have wealthy friends. And if you do have wealthy friends, the idea might suck, but you can still at least try it and continue to iterate until you find something that works. I think that's the first bit. Second bit is like the research in the US shows that like once you get to the later stages, 40% of all venture capitalists in the United States went to two schools, Harvard and Stanford. I think Yale comes in number 3 or thereabouts. So it's kind of these really kind of very privileged networks that support each other and that went to the same schools and invest in people that went to the same schools. In the UK, it would be Oxford and Cambridge, and then maybe a few of the business schools, so like INSEAD, LBS, et cetera. And that they're then kind of responsible for about 30%, I think it is, of all the people who are in venture in the UK. So what you have then are these kind of like, it's hard to start the business at the beginning if you are going for a venture backable business, or even if you're not, to kind of find the initial capital to kind of really test out the idea. And then afterwards, it's really difficult to find the networks of people that can say to you, who've been there and done that, and can say, hey, you're kind of going down the wrong direction, or I can introduce you to someone who's gone through a similar problem and they might be able to help you. And then the later stages, it's really hard to kind of find people who are willing to give you the shot, right? Because a lot of times investors say, oh, you have to have a warm intro. I've seen on some people's LinkedIn pages, if you can't find a way to get to me, then that means that you're probably not a really good founder. No, it just means I didn't go to school with you, or it means that I don't know someone that knows you. Doesn't mean that I'm a really bad founder. So I think that there are a lot of kind of middle class or kind of privileged assumptions, or that are kind of then normalized and then kind of used to judge people who can't benefit from those assumptions because they don't have the initial capital, or can't find it from friends, fools, and family, or they don't have the networks to kind of get the warm intros, or they don't have the network to be able to get the information or the mentorship that they may need to overcome certain challenges that are kind of typical of businesses once you know what's a typical business.
Yeah, definitely. In your opinion, what conditions are best for supporting diverse business owners to grow then? I mean, what conditions are best then for supporting diverse business owners to grow, in your opinion?
Need to change to help diverse businesses grow?
Essentially, yeah. What do we need to create? What conditions are best for this?
Money. So it's like, so it's kind of.
We love that.
Yeah,
so
I think that now there is a phrase that's going around, make the hire, send the wire. So if you're a large company or a fund that's wondering what you can do, it's really simple. Hire more diverse folks. I think, one of the other things that came out from the British Business Bank report, which I found really interesting, because the people writing it were mostly, white and privileged. So it wasn't kind of any sort of like biased report in that sense. And they were saying that it's usually the case that minority founders only get funded from minority investors. So you do need to diversify the pool of people who have the capital to actually invest because of some of those unconscious biases that we mentioned before. And then you need to just make sure that you're actually investing in minority founders. I mean, I think that mentorship and all of that kind of stuff is great, but maybe we're a bit over mentored and underfunded. So right now, the key is like what makes a business go round and what kills a business in the majority of cases is ultimately running out of cash. So you just need to make sure that minority founders have access to cash.
Wow. And do you actually find those minority founders? I mean, how do you engage with them, to ensure that they have awareness of what is available?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it is about kind of opening up networks. I think in a lot of ways, apartheid is a really strong term, but I think it's kind of like there's still a lot of segregation where communities that are white and communities that are non-white don't really mix. And so people tend to think, oh my God, it's like, I don't know where I can find a pipeline of minority entrepreneurs. The data actually suggests that minorities are overrepresented in entrepreneurship relative to the white population, right? And that's because minorities might not be able to get access to traditional employment. So it might not be the case that you're going to be able to send your CV to Google or Facebook or McKinsey or Goldman Sachs if you have the kind of right qualifications and kind of be given, maybe a fair shot. So you might kind of then start to figure out how you might need to create your own opportunity. So minorities actually overrepresented in entrepreneurship, but still underfunded. I think in the US, the numbers were something like Blacks or minorities are, I think it was Black population in particular, Blacks are 14% of the population, 13 to 14% of the population, but 19 to 20% of Blacks are entrepreneurs, right? So it's not this issue that there's not a pipeline. It's just that a lot of people aren't being seen simply because they don't belong to the networks of the people who don't see them.
Yeah. So how is FounderTribes essentially bridging this gap then? Because clearly you're offering a potential service that could give these people access to this funding. What sort of initiatives are you sort of working on or looking to work on?
Yeah, so it's kind of right now is a really great moment to be supporting minority entrepreneurs. Like the US government has committed to creating almost like something similar to the Small Business Association that will specifically focus on creating funds that are made up of diverse investors that will invest in diverse founders. I think that Elizabeth Warren, when she was running for president, said that she would commit about $7 billion to that. And the commissions that I mentioned before suggest that the British government is also thinking about how to address this issue of the underrepresentation of minorities in entrepreneurship, particularly when it comes to getting funded. So what we're doing is we're leveraging the moment. I think it's a great moment, if you look at it optimistically, to kind of address this issue. And we're working with large corporates that kind of say, like in the US, more so than in the UK, I think it's something like J. Morgan has committed $30 billion to supporting Black businesses with over 4 years, with about 200 to 300 million of that being specifically focused on entrepreneurship, Black entrepreneurs. Eventually that will trickle down into other spaces. Similarly, Yale, my alma mater, has said that they have a $31 billion endowment. They will not invest in limited partners that, or they will challenge limited partners that don't have diversity metrics. So what we're trying to do is to kind of leverage this moment and to work with large corporates, governments, and other organizations, including venture capital funds, and say, how can we work together to put this app into the hands of entrepreneurs that are right now just being rejected and told, hey, your idea isn't good enough or you're too early, without much feedback or support. We can actually be that bridge in a scalable way to solve this problem. So that's how we're kind of going about it for the moment, working with the folks who have the money and really should have the incentive to try and change what's really a social problem.
Incredible. So much work that you're putting into this. I'm sure
it's only just the start of the day for Gary as well.
To the start of the day for you, yeah, of course it is.
Gary, we're trying to get viewers to engage with action after today's event, so our focus is on EDI. And what advice would you give to any business looking to actually take action? I know you're specifically talking about funding here, but given your experience, what would you say to any business, any size? We're not all JP Morgans, unfortunately, that can set aside that sort of figure to invest, but any action that you would recommend a business could take, 2 or 3 things that they could potentially do to make a difference?
Businesses, we mean kind of corporates.
well, just any size of business. No, we engage
with sole traders all the way up to corporate organisations, just to embrace diversity in their organisations, make it part of their culture.
So a wider question, really.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I think the most important thing that any corporate can do beyond kind of giving money to invest in startups, if that's kind of what their business is, would be to kind of diversify their leadership teams. So if you have a senior leadership team, it probably, and you really want to make a difference, hire diverse folks. And that should not just be, because, a lot of times what people do is they focus on, I'm going to get a diverse intern. But the intern is going to be there for a summer, and that's not really going to change any sort of system that's in place. You really need to kind of make sure that the decision makers are diverse, and that includes the board. If you're a large corporate, you have a board, make sure you have diverse people on your board. Make sure that your senior leadership teams are diverse. And then after that, you can start to focus on making sure that the incoming folks that are coming in are also diverse as well. But I would think changing the people that control and manage your organization is one of the best ways to kind of create role models, but also create change.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really good.
Great advice.
Thank you so much, Gary. We're going to let you get on with your day now to change the world, clearly.
I must tell you briefly, how excited Lydia was that when you agreed that you would join us today. She sent me a message about 3 in the morning, and she was very excited that you were joining us. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely privileged to have your time. So thank you so much.
Have a good day and stay safe.
Thanks, you too.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Was it 3 in the morning? Wow.
No, well, I don't know. You send me emails at ghastly times of the day. And I probably send them back as well, to be fair.